Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Laura and I'm a full-time artist, blogger, and small business owner. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a seamless pattern in Procreate with just a few simple steps. For this tutorial, it may be helpful to have some knowledge on the Procreate app. However, it's really beginner friendly, so you can totally jump in and follow along even if it's your first time using the app. To get started, we're going to create a new canvas in Procreate by tapping on this plus icon and then New Canvas. The canvas is going to measure 3000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi, and this will give us a maximum of 55 layers to work with. Now, depending on how elaborate your pattern designs are, you may need to reduce the size of your canvas to increase the amount of layers. In general, I find that a 3000 by 3000 canvas with 55 layers is more than enough for most pattern designs, and it also produces a really nice high quality image. Once you've created your new canvas, tap the Layers panel, and on layer 1, you're going to fill this layer with the background color of your choice. I'm going to go ahead and use this mauve tone, so you can just select the color you want and then drag and drop it into the layer to fill it. Now you're ready to start creating your design. For this tutorial, I'm using a few digital stickers from my Bears and Bows bundle, paired with a few simple flower doodles. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description box where you can purchase and download the artwork, as well as a link to my blog post where you can find the color palette with hex code numbers, just in case you want to follow along with this exact tutorial. But of course, feel free to use your own illustrations, doodles, or even some abstract shapes just to practice going through the steps. So in my case, I'll be using the digital stickers or clip art from my collection. If you are going to be using something like digital stickers or clip art and you want to import them into your canvas, you can do so by tapping on the wrench, add, and then insert a photo. Once you tap insert photo, it will open up your camera roll. So of course, you're going to want all of the illustrations or elements that you want to use saved on your camera roll beforehand. I'm going to go ahead and select this illustration, and it will import the element to your canvas. So you can resize it, rotate it, and manipulate this as you like. So I'm going to continue adding in all of the elements that I want to use in my design. To keep this a bit more simplified, I'm just going to stick to these 3 elements. And looking at the illustrations that I've selected, I think I'm going to go back in and change the color of my background to blue instead. Yeah, I like the way that looks better already. So any clip art that you import will be added as its own separate layer. I'm going to go ahead and actually get rid of the body on this bear because for this design, I just want his head, which is kind of creepy and weird to say, but I'm going to go ahead and use just a big brush to get rid of his body. And manipulate the illustration a bit. I'm going to use a textured brush in the eraser tool, zoom in nice and close, and just erase some of this scarf. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So now you can start placing your elements on the canvas and duplicating them, rotating them, resizing them as you please. The key thing to keep in mind here is that you want to make sure that none of the elements are touching the edges of the canvas. So you definitely don't want to create your design where any of the elements are off the edge or even touching the canvas. So make sure you're leaving a decent amount of space around all of your elements. And if you're drawing in your own elements, just make sure you're also staying within the canvas and not going off the edges. So I'm going to play around with these elements a bit and start placing them on my canvas to create the design. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this layout so far. What you're going to do is if you are using several different elements like this, you definitely want to group them together so that they are each on their own layer. In my case, it would be all the bears on one layer, all the bows on one layer, and all the cherries on one layer. To quickly combine or merge the layers in Procreate, you can pinch them together like so. I personally like to rename my layers just because it keeps things nice and organized. And it's also nice to have later on for a future step. Definitely don't need to rename the layers if it's not your cup of tea, but I personally really enjoy having an organized layers panel. While I like this design, I think that it's missing a little bit of filler, so I will be going in and creating a new layer. And on this layer, I will just draw in a few simple flowers. In this color, I'm going to use a textured ink brush, which is my favorite brush. I'm just going to start filling in some of these areas with some simple flower designs. Okay, I'm liking this so far. And again, now I have my flowers on this layer, so let me rename them. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to rename the background layer. This is what I like to call the initial pattern design or the initial layout. And again, I want to make note that none of the elements are touching the edges of the canvas. So they're all nicely contained within the canvas. Next, we're going to group all of these layers together. And to do so, you can just swipe to the right on all of them and then tap group. You can toggle this arrow to close and open the group. And then we're going to duplicate this group 4 times to create 5 copies. So to duplicate the group, you're going to swipe to the left, duplicate, and do this 4 times. So now you should have 5 copies of this group. You're going to rename the very bottom group. And I like to call this original art, or you can call it backup or safety or whatever you'd like. And then you're going to swipe to the left and lock it, and then hide the layer by toggling off the check mark. This group on the bottom is now just going to serve as a safety net with the original artwork in it, so we're not really going to be using it for anything, which is why we've locked it. But I like to keep it there just in case we make a mistake later on or we need to come back to the original artwork for some reason. Next, we're going to rename these groups in order. So from top to bottom, you're going to rename them top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. Then select the arrow tool or the transform tool, and under snapping, make sure you have magnetics and snapping toggled on. And I also like to keep the distance at max and velocity at max as well. Next, I'm going to navigate over to my top left group and hide all of the others. So we're only working with one group at a time. Select the group, select the arrow tool, pinch the canvas from the outside like this, just so you can see the full canvas. And then you're going to take this entire group and move it up towards the top left quadrant. And because we've turned on magnetics and snapping, it should snap into place like that. So you'll know it's perfectly snapped into place if you see the orange guidelines on the corners, as well as these little blue nodes that pop up right on the edges. And then let go and place. And then we're going to do the same step to the rest of the 4 groups in their respective quadrants. So the top right group, we're going to turn it on, grab the arrow tool, and move it over to the top right. And again, carefully make sure it snaps into place. Once again, you'll notice the orange guidelines, and then release. Bottom left, toggle on, arrow tool, drag it to the bottom left, release. And then lastly, the bottom right, toggle on, arrow tool, drag it to the bottom right, and make sure it's snapping into place, and release. Technically, at this point, we have created a repeat pattern, But usually this isn't the final design because of depending on the original layout of your elements, you may notice there's some areas on the canvas that look a bit empty, or maybe the spacing feels kind of off. It's not super obvious on my design, but I still feel like it's something that I want to adjust a bit. To fix these gaps, you can always add some more elements, you can move some elements around, you can draw in more elements. But before making any changes to the design itself, I'm going to organize the layers panel again. Toggle all of these groups open again. And as you can see, now all of the elements are split up into different groups, and we want to merge them back onto their own layers together. So to do so, I want to combine all of the flower layers, all of the bow layers, etc. I'm going to swipe right on the flower layers. There should be 4 of them because we've had 4 groups. Then you're going to tap on group, and then it will create a new group with just the flower layers. Tap where it says new group, and then you're going to tap flatten. So go ahead and do the same with the rest of your elements. I'm going to combine all of my bows, group. Now they're all together. Tap on new group and flatten to flatten all the bows. And this is where it really helps to name your layers so that in case there's no visible representation of the element on the layer, you can still grab them all together and group them and then flatten them. So we've got bears, group, flatten. And lastly, you want to do the same with the background as well. All the background layers, group them together and flatten. So now you should be left with 3 empty layers. You can go ahead and swipe left and just delete those. Now that you have organized your layers panel again and all the different elements are on their own separate layers, you can continue tweaking the design as needed. I'm going to take this bow and rotate it and maybe resize it a little. So I'm going to head to the bow layer, and it might be helpful to uncheck or untoggle the magnetics and snapping tool for this step, just so that the elements can move a little bit more freely. I'm going to go up to the selection tool and grab this bow, and then the arrow tool, and with that you can move it around, resize it. So I just kind of feel like it would look better here. And I may also head to the flowers layer and just add a couple more flowers to the design. And then again, you can pinch layers together to merge them. Okay, so while you're doing this step and tweaking the pattern a bit and adding in different elements, keep in mind, again, you don't want to be editing, moving, or touching any of the elements that are going off the edges of the canvas, because those are the parts of the pattern that are going to create the repeat. So if you mess with any of these elements that are off the edge of the canvas, it's going to create a seam in your design, which you don't want. Once you're happy with the canvas now and you feel like it's nicely filled in, it's time to preview the pattern on a smaller scale to make sure that you like the way it repeats. And also this would be the time to check and make sure that it's completely seamless. So once again, we're going to duplicate this layer to create 5 copies. On the bottom copy, again, we're going to rename this Original Art, or you can name it Original Art 2. And this will, again, just become a safety layer. So swipe to lock and uncheck it to hide it. So this is now your second version of the design. And again, a safety net just in case we want to go back to it, but we won't be using that layer anymore. For this last step, you don't really need to rename the groups, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to, just to keep things nice and organized. So we do top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. Then we're going to head back to the arrow tool and make sure that the magnetics and snapping are toggled on again. This time we're going to select all 4 of these layers. So swipe right on all of them and then tap the arrow tool and then resize them all so that they fill up just one quadrant of the canvas. So again, you'll see that it snaps perfectly into place once the orange guidelines show up, and then release. Now you can move each of these groups over to their quadrants. So top left will remain there, top right will get moved over to the top right quadrant, bottom left, just drag and drop down to the bottom left. And again, be very mindful of the snapping and keep your eye out for those orange guidelines just to make sure that everything is perfectly in place. See here, I messed up. I let it go too soon. So you can always tap reset and then try it again. Like so. And there you go. Now you have your repeat pattern on a smaller scale. At this point, you're going to want to zoom in nice and close and make sure that there aren't any seams or empty pixels. Just do like one last final inspection. Okay, it's looking good. And that's it. Your pattern is complete. This is your seamless pattern done. To export, you can tap on the wrench, share, and I like to export as a JPEG, and then save image. So now this tile you can use to create so many fun products like fabric designs, wallpaper, wrapping paper, stationery, anything that requires a repeat pattern. There's so many fun options out there, like for print-on-demand products, like t-shirts with all over prints or mugs with all over prints. There's just so many things you can do. You can create wallpapers for your tech devices and on and on and on. There's just so many different things you can do with a seamless repeat pattern. If you have any questions or have any requests for any future design tutorials, be sure to leave a comment and check the description box for links to the artwork and the blog post, which has the step-by-step tutorial written out so you can follow it along that way if you prefer. I think that's all for now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.